Yes, ma'am.
Dan came down to say hi to you, but he has to leave first.
Okay, how are you? Oh, can you at least sit down in time enough for us to recognize you and then you can head out? Okay, we're just going to mention your name and we'll tell them that you're trying to get to the Broncos game. No, I'm just playing. You know I'm teasing you. I am teasing. Thank you so much.
I did that. That's my fault. Oh no, I heard that. D-I-E-D-O-R.
Testing. Can you turn me on? Can you turn me on? Testing, testing. Can we turn me on? Am I on? Testing. Testing. Somebody's up there. Okay. It says that it's on. Is it not on? Okay. We need to get that on. Okay. Yeah. Okay, panelists, if I can have you start assembling yourselves to your seat, please. We got about 3 minutes that we're going to get started. All panelists, if I can have you come into your seats, please.
How are you, Dan?
We're going to get started in about 3 minutes. If I can have all panelists, please begin to come to your seats, please. You should still be on the side. I'm on the side.
Are these yours, Tico? Anybody? Any takers for gloves? Yeah, I know. So moved around.
It'll be 2 minutes, so if you start now, we'll be able to do it. Here's your mic. Maybe not, Pastor. And there. I believe so. Doesn't mean you'll start, but we're going to have you pass it down on that end. Doesn't mean you'll start, but we're going to have you with the mic on that end.
How are you, sir? Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Starting early now, I understand. Yeah, good for you. Yeah.
Testing, testing. Okay, is County Commissioner Peggy Littleton outside? Does anybody see County Commissioner Peggy Littleton? Okay. Carolyn, can you see if we can find Peggy Littleton? Thank you.
While we're waiting, would you, Pastor Cox, open us up in a word of prayer, please?
Let us all pray. Father God, Lord, we thank you. We thank you for this opportunity that you've given us all. We thank you, Lord, for bringing us all together, Lord, to represent our community, Colorado Springs and its surrounding areas. We thank you for the people that it represents. We ask for your wisdom and your guidance. We thank you for Dr. Hardy for bringing us all together, Lord, to discuss a very important issue. We ask that you bless it in Jesus' name. Amen.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Sherry Gibson, and I'm really, really happy to see everyone here this evening. I know it's cold and snowy, and the Broncos are playing. They're my team, too, so go Broncos, and somebody check the score and keep me up to date. Let me know that they're winning, not if they're losing. But welcome to our dialogue, our community dialogue on the legacy of Ferguson. Not specific to the Ferguson event, but really about all of the events that have happened nationally. We want to make sure that we recognize that there are so many things that have happened that have been tragic and over these past couple months. So we're not just focusing on that, but other things as well. This evening, I'd like to welcome all of our guests. Specifically, we have our elected officials and VIPs who have made it out tonight, so I'd like to recognize them. Representative Tony Exum, thank you for coming.
Could you stand up?
Representative Pete Lee, thank you for coming. Mr. Carl Middich, Professor of Criminal Justice from the University of Phoenix, thank you. Our District Attorney, Dan May, thank you for coming, sir. County Commissioner Darrell Glenn, thank you for being here, sir. County Commissioner Dennis Heisey, thank you, sir, for being here. And our secondary hostess this evening, Miss and County Commissioner Peggy Littleton.
Well, thank you all for being here this evening, and we're really extremely glad that you could join us to have this community conversation. So, Dr. Tico Harding, thank you so much. Sherry Gibson, thank you so much for hosting this evening. Really, what this is about is ensuring that we move forward with an open, honest discussion so that you can meet our law enforcement here and see that they are normal people. None of them wore their suits tonight. They're approachable. They're people that we can communicate with very easily. And we want to make sure that we are going to be proactive within our community to ensure that we have an ongoing conversation so that we can ensure the economic vitality within our community is not going to be disrupted nor destroyed by others. We want to really promote that this community is a very interactive community. We listen well, we interact well, we play well together. And we will continue to do so. We all have open door policies. This is a community that can be resilient, that can be moving forward in a positive direction, and I think can be a good role model for the rest of the nation. So we want to thank all of our panelists and our host for this evening.
So just a quick introduction of our panelists. This evening we do have, my papers are getting in the way. We do have our Sheriff-elect, Bill Elder, Chief Pete Carey, Chief Todd Evans, Mrs. Lynn Lee, Anthony Perez, Jerry J.T. Travis, Rob Wilson, Pastor Reginald Cox, Trevor Deerdorf, Henry Allen. Thank you so much, and we have our moderator this evening, Dr. Tico Hardy.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, everybody. And we really want to thank you so much for being in attendance with us. Just want to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about the rationale behind the forum that you are a part of today. A big part of it, as we were watching what was going on in the national media, Sherry and I had a dialogue just mother to mother. And really concerned about the educational piece of what was going on. We saw the protests and we saw the rioting and we saw, we had prayer vigils and many other things. And we wondered, what about the educational piece? So a big part of this forum is just one perspective. There are many perspectives in which you can broach this subject, and we do understand that we're not going to solve all of America's race relations in 2 hours. So what we wanted to do is to take a proactive opportunity. We have a new sheriff-elect that will be joining us starting January the 1st, who really is what we believe is a great visionary. So we'd like to take an opportunity to introduce you to the people that often when we see in these crises are accountable to us. So a little bit different perspective for us is that when Sherry and I was talking, we said, who do we bring to the table in which we can hold accountable? Who do we bring to the table? So the makeup that you see here is by design, more strategically, not necessarily around race as it is about solution and how do we come together and how do we work together as a team and how do we build our community. So a lot of their focus tonight will be really central to El Paso County. We can only really try to hold them accountable to what we do here in this county. So we don't dismiss what's going on across the nation. We don't dismiss these incidents. I tell people from personal background, I come from generational poverty. I grew up in many, many cities similar to Ferguson. I personally have been racially profiled. I personally had experiences with excessive force in other states. And, my family is grieving the loss of a loved one who had an interaction with police. So this is personal on many levels. I have 6 brothers. And then I have a 16-year-old son. So that's my personal background. But I also believe with everything within me, this forum was birthed out of much prayer, that we can have unity and that we can strengthen our community. So I'd like for you to give our panel an opportunity to kind of answer a few questions. The makeup of this is they're going to spend about 30 minutes or so, 40 minutes, and they're going to answer some questions in which we've gathered from people. We've done some research and we've gathered that from people all throughout. Okay, so what we're going to do initially, they're going to answer some questions. Those questions were created from people that Sherry and I have talked to and had some dialogue in the community to see what they felt like we needed to address. After we get done hearing from them, they're going to try their best to answer questions from you all. What you're going to do is you have 2 people. You have Tawanda Lewis. Raise your hand for me. She's over here. She has index cards. You have Carolyn right here who has index cards. And what you will do is raise your hand. They will give you an index card. And you will go ahead and write your question on that index card. And then we will have the panel. You can address it to them specifically, or you can address it broadly. And so, sorry, we moved them out here, but the names of everybody and the organizations that they represent are up here. And so we'll have them reintroduce themselves and the purpose of them being here today on the panel. So also, before we move forward, is that clear? Do we understand how that's going to work? You're going to get an index card. You're going to turn it to the helpers. They're in return going to bring it to me, and we're going to pose that question. We're going to group like questions together. And a lot of this is so that we can have people who have similar questions, that we can just ask one question. Does that seem pretty clear on the game rules? And so we're asking, just in closing for me, is that everybody really be respectful. We have we want everybody's perspective to be heard. And so if we can't do this with civil discourse, then we will have to unfortunately ask you to exit the auditorium. So we want to do this as respectfully as we can, and respect each panelist and give them their time and not interrupt if we can. And also we need to acknowledge Representative Councilman Val Snyder. Are you, Councilman? Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And just give your elected officials another round of applause. I'm so grateful. And many of you, I apologize if I haven't recognized you. I see somebody from Mayor Bach's office in here. I see many representatives, and we're just grateful that you would join us today. Okay, so we're going to get started. And so the first question is going to go to Sheriff-elect Bill Elder. Do you mind if I call you guys by your first name? Because the officer and sergeant and all that might get,
Bill's
might
good
get a
for
little
me.
confusing. Okay. So, Bill, we know that you were previously a chief in Fountain, Colorado. Can you tell us what are some of the things that you have done to work collaboratively there? And what are your plans for building community relations across El Paso County?
Sure. I'm Bill Elder. Is it warm in here with everybody else? And I decided that tonight is a night to wear a wool jacket. Thank you, Dr. Hardy. Thanks, Sherry, for putting this on. And, you know, currently I'm the deputy chief in Fountain. Todd is the chief. And it isn't anything that I did. It's what we did as a community. It's what we did as a police department. We've got Darrell Green, one of our sergeants here that I heavily recruited back from one of the police departments up north. And what we did there is we immediately began to partner with the community in meetings just like this. And we sat down and we said, what is it that you need to help our community, to help our police department? What do you need? Not what do we think you need, what do you need? And we'd start out with a list on a whiteboard, and we would write out all the topics that we needed to cover. And then we'd find the top 5, like cleaning up the neighborhood. And so we put together a day where we brought in, I think we brought in 4 or 5 huge dumpsters. And the police department and the fire department teamed up with the city, and we walked around door to door collecting trash. And then we had a community-wide picnic, and we cleaned up a park in the first one. And in the second one, we partnered with the New Jerusalem Church, and we had them donate some land, and we got a grant to outfit it, and they donated that park to the city. We worked together with the people in the community to get these things done. And the Colorado Springs Police Department has been doing the same thing for many years. And so we know now that with El Paso County, we'll bring everyone together. We will make this a region-wide approach, and we'll hold meetings throughout the city and the county, and we'll do the same thing. We'll start to find out what it is that you want as a community that we can do better. And not just in white neighborhoods, but in neighborhoods all over the community. That's what we want to do.
Thank you. Also for our panelists, any time that someone addresses a question and you have some feedback that you want to jump in, feel free to go ahead and address that question as well. Thank you, Bill.
Yep.
Now, we know that a big reason that we're here is because we're dealing with nationally what we're seeing, race relations and incidents in which blacks are having or being shot, and due to the fact of, interactions with police. Chief Carey, I'm wondering if you can tell me, what is the current procedure for the use of force within Colorado Springs PD?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Pete Carey. I'm the Colorado Springs Police Chief. I have about 3 years in as the Chief of Police and about 30 years in the Police Department. Now, Tika, do I have to stand up and walk around like Bill Elder, or is that just for elected officials?
Whatever makes you feel.
You can
Whatever
sit.
makes you feel comfortable.
It's okay. I'll just sit put. Being a police officer for about 30 years, I can say that probably the most traumatic thing a community and a police department can go through is a use of lethal force by a police department. And technically that is still defined as a homicide. It's the intentional taking of someone else's life. And I'm kind of glad Dan May's here tonight because On the occasions when the Colorado Springs Police Department, and I believe every police department in the El Paso and Teller County region is involved in a shooting, Dan's team leads the investigation, and they do an independent investigation. There are times when certain parts of the investigation, witness interviews and things like that, are handled by the police department, but it's overseen by Mr. Dan May and the 4th Judicial District. So that's how it happens here, and it does take a little bit of time, and I think that's one of the disconnects when you read in the newspaper or see on the news that an officer used some kind of force or someone got hurt seriously. It does take a matter of time, sometimes a couple of months, to figure out exactly what happened and complete it and do a thorough investigation. But it is handled very independently by Mr. Dan May and his team. There's been a lot of discussion in this area in the last year or so about the value or the utility of actually having an independent critical incident team that's made up of detectives and personnel from everyone from the district attorney's office to CSPD to Woodland Park to Manitou Springs, and coming together the best of the best investigators, someone not necessarily invested in CSPD or Fountain PD or the sheriff's office, and they take a look at the incident. I'll be honest with you, there are times when as a police officer, you're part of the investigation and it involves somebody you've worked with for a couple of years. You got to take a couple steps back. So that's kind of what Dan's team does. They make sure it's objective and it's done impartially and thoroughly. So that's kind of the way that it works. And there's a lot of moving parts with any homicide investigation.
Thank you. The next question is, I recently found out that when it comes to standard operating equipment, that different police departments, depending upon where you are, may have access to different equipment. So as the public, sometimes we say, well, why didn't they use a taser? Why didn't they use pepper spray? Why didn't they use a different option? And so it was fascinating to me to find out that CSPD, Fountain PD, Manitou, and so forth could have different standard operating equipment. I'm wondering, Officer, soon to be Sergeant Wilson, if you can tell us what does that mean and a little bit about standard operating equipment, and why is it that shooting or using a gun seems to be the primary use of force that we're seeing?
Well, can you hear me? Every police department is a little bit different. In our police department, all officers are issued a taser. And so we're issued that because it's an option. It's a less lethal option, and we use it when we need to. And let me back up for a second. I don't believe any officer on our force wants to go out here and use deadly force against somebody. We're all human, and that's a tragedy, and we only do that when there's absolutely no other option. And the taser and the other equipment we have, pepper spray and things like that, those are options that we can use depending on the situation. And we only use enough force relevant to the situation. If we're going to arrest somebody, we use enough force to effect arrest, and that's all we do. And we're supposed to be able to dial back. Once we have control of the situation, we're supposed to be able to dial back and stop that use of force. So, and I'm not sure. I don't know what equipment El Paso County has or Fountain PD, but so we all have different equipment. But in CSPD, we all have tasers. We're all taught to use them. We go through use of force quite often. Every year we go through training to make sure every officer understands how important that is and when to use it.
Thank you. Did anyone else, do any of the other representatives, do you guys have different equipment options?
I just want to add real quick before Chief Evans gets up there. The way our policy reads at the Colorado Springs Police Department is an officer should respond with a physical arrest in the least violent way possible, the least violent method. So again, our officers are trained to use, if it's a taser or if it's a hands-on or even a verbal command, is a de-escalation technique. So long before an officer resorts to a handgun, there are many other tools in the tool bag.
Okay, so just for the audience, so are you saying that a person could go to Denver and a taser not be an option from your knowledge?
I think it's a possibility throughout the state of Colorado, throughout the nation. Sometimes it comes down to dollars. Does the police department, are they able to afford to put a taser in everybody's hand? I can tell you that when we started tasers at CSPD about 7 or 8 years ago, we didn't have enough for every officer. So what we did, we bought as many as we could, and then we issued them out every day. And then we found about a year or two into it that officers are going to take care of equipment when it's issued to them, and it's their assigned taser. So when there's damage to it or it doesn't work, it gets fixed quicker when they own it. At least it's part of their equipment they get every day. So we went to issuing tasers about 3 years ago. I can tell you that's how this CSPD. Todd, I don't know if you guys all have tasers down there.
We do. And to go back with what Rob said, he was correct in saying that when we have these, we have a use of force continuum, and we're kind of getting away from that. But when you have a use of force continuum, you train the officers or deputies, it's the same, on to use what force is necessary. But keep in mind, we're talking about humans, we're talking about people. So even though that they get all that training and it's hammered into their minds and those things, I speak from experience that when you're involved in one of these situations, it always doesn't go as you would hope it would. So even though all our officers have tasers as well, it's considered, as Rob said, a less lethal use of force. They also have OC on their belts. And I was involved in a shooting back in the middle 90s, and the first thing they do is they take your belt and they take pictures of it, and they actually put those pictures into evidence. And then when you're in court, you actually have to justify and answer, why did you not use OC in this situation? We didn't have tasers back then, but you have to, as an officer, you have to justify, this is why I couldn't use this is why I couldn't use that. But I want everybody to keep in mind, the officer in Ferguson, he had a taser and chose not to wear it. He didn't have one that night. That was his choice. That's something he should have to answer to. But just because you have that equipment doesn't always mean it's operational. We have a taser for each officer, but sometimes we don't have enough tasers because they're broken. So there is different things for the different departments, but I want everyone to keep something in mind. We're talking about people, and just because you give people the right tools doesn't mean they always use them appropriately. Okay?
But as a police chief or a sheriff, it's our job to make sure they have those tools. So I think speaking
Absolutely.
for every department here, we issue and we require that an officer carries a taser as a less lethal form of a tool.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions for law enforcement, then we're going to switch to some of our other panelists, but I wanted to get some of these really, some of the things that we needed to have some facts so that we can proceed in conversation. So since you opened that door, Officer Evans, what type of training do law enforcement officers receive, both in the academy and on the force, once they get to the force, in regards to working with people from diverse backgrounds, such as people, from underserved communities, homeless populations, people struggling with mental health and substance abuse, and what in their training helps them to mediate conflict?
You bet. Thank you. And we didn't plan this, but it's a perfect question for me because I spent several years as the training director for a post academy. So you're exactly right. The basic training in a post academy, and what a post academy means is it's your basic police academies. And in your basic police academies, we have ethics training, we have anti-bias training, and then we have diversity training. Do we think it's enough? No. We don't think any of the training that we put folks through in a basic academy is enough. To give you a general idea, academies in this area run between 20 weeks and 24 weeks. So on those topics in our academies, we spent about 1 day. I think, Henry, weren't you an instructor for us in those? Right now we have Dorell, who's an instructor for us down at Fountain. And what we have is we also will come back during in-service training, and that's held once a year. And I can't tell you that those topics are covered every year because they're not. But when we see we have issues or something comes up, then we will come back and do more training on those subjects. In the basic police academy that we had not only individuals from our department come in and teach that, but we had other individuals that would come in from outside and teach on the diversity and the anti-bias. So they do get a basic level. About a day's worth is the average, about 8 hours. But do they get that every year? No, they don't. If we see individuals that have issues, they do get that. Going to the special needs group, I sat on the board for the Pikes Peak Mental Health for several years. And I can tell you that that is a challenge that we're struggling with right now. Because the mental health, back in the days of Pikes Peak Mental Health, we actually had different services that we offered to our officers and deputies that have been taken away because of funding. We used to have counselors that if we were out on scene with someone who was dealing with something, we could actually put them on the phone with that counselor and they would give our deputies or officers assistance right out on scene on what needed to be done with that individual. Well, those type of programs have gone away. as the state funding for mental health programs have gone away, more and more of our officers are going out and dealing with the mentally challenged folks that really should be getting professional treatment. And it's a lot more difficult when you're an officer and it's 2 a.m. and you're out dealing with someone who's not only got a mental challenge, but they're also self-medicating themselves. It's a setup for a confrontation. It's extremely difficult. So we need your help in that arena. We need more help that we can offer our officers, because they are not professionals. And their job is to go out and try to handle a situation within 10 or 15 minutes. And folks, I'm just telling you, that's not realistic. It doesn't always happen the way it should. So that's one reason we're here tonight, is to ask some more help from everyone else. Our officers and our deputies need help in that area.
You want to talk about CIT training a little bit?
Yeah.
The CIT training that we all go through that...
Pete, that's kind of a CSPD-sponsored program. Do you want to...
Right, so about 4 or 5 years ago, we discovered a really good training for our police officers called crisis intervention training, how to deal with somebody that's at a level where they're going to hurt themselves or somebody else. I believe it's a 40-hour class.
It is.
CSPD has 682 officers right now, and we've gotten well over half through that. Taking a week for an officer to go off the street and train them, it's tough logistically. We're having trouble answering our calls for service in a timely manner, but we've committed to it, and we have well over 300 police officers trained in that CIT, and it's all the things that Chief Evans just talked about, dealing with somebody at their worst moment and doing what we can to help them without having to use force at all, hopefully. And it's been really, really helpful in getting people calmed down and getting them the help they need.
Well, and from Fountain's point of view, almost all of the officers in Fountain have got CIT training, and a very large percentage of the Sheriff's Office patrol officers have also been through that same 40-hour class. And like Pete says, it gives them a level of intervention that they don't normally get through an academy, and it's pretty intense, 40 hours.
Thank you. One more question before we involve some of our other panelists. And either of the law enforcers can answer this. If there is, and also this will be the one question that if our district attorney would like to weigh in on, this will be the one question that we would like his input. If there is a deadly force incident involving the police, how can the community be sure that the investigation is fair and impartial?
I'll be glad to give him a mic.
So we will have our district attorney weigh in, and then if we can have the law enforcement, because they're on the boots on the ground, to kind of tag team with the district attorney and tell us what does that look like as a community. How can we ensure that there's fairness and impartiality?
You betcha. The policy that we have here in the 4th Judicial District goes back well over 30 years. I've been a prosecutor for over 30 years. I was hired by Bob Russell. When I came on, every officer involved shooting went to the grand jury, and the grand jury decided whether the officer should be charged or not. When Barney Ayupa was elected, he decided that the DA's office would make those decisions, and he didn't bring any of them to the grand jury. He made the decision of whether there would be charges or not. When John Suthers came in as the district attorney, he kind of blended the two. What he did is he said, if it's a pretty easy decision, clearly unlawful use of force, or clearly not an unlawful use of force, our office will make the decision. If it's a close one, then we're going to give it to the citizens of this community, which is the grand jury, and let them decide. Jeannie Smith continued with that, and I have continued with the same thing in my 6 years. If an officer is involved in a shooting, we have a rather broad policy. We do not allow, as you've seen in Denver a few years ago, the Denver Police Department investigated their own. Well, at that point, people questioned and did not have faith in the answers that were being given, because it's two important things for us. One is getting to the right answer. The second is getting to an answer that the public trusts. Each one of those is equally important. If we get to the right answer and nobody trusts it, then we wasted a lot of time. So when an officer-involved shooting happens, we actually have it broader. It's use of force. And use of force is defined, we have a written policy. I've given it to the press. I've given it to the NAACP. If anybody would like a copy of it, they can see it. What we say is if an officer uses force and someone is injured, seriously injured, or killed, we respond. We bring our investigative team and we come out. Quite frankly, the officer is a suspect for us. We are there to investigate the officer. Most of the time, there's some other underlying crime. Could be drugs, could be a burglary, could be a robbery, could be an assault and a domestic violence. The agency continues on that investigation. We're there to investigate the police officer. We take over that investigation. We have a scene person, we do interviews, we're the ones who deal with the labs to do the testing, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. We then make a decision of whether the use of force was appropriate or not. Use of force can be certain holds that you've heard of. It could be a gun. Quite frankly, it could be that tapping thing they do when they tap the cars together to spin somebody out. If somebody's injured in that, we're going to take a look at that, and we're going to investigate that. We did look back in the last 10 years. We've had 23 people shot and killed by law enforcement, and that ranges in this county and El Paso and Teller counties. Some of those were Cripple Creek, Woodland Park, Colorado Springs Police Department, El Paso County Sheriff, Manitou Springs. It's been a variety of agencies. We did look back because I know it's been in the news. Of those, one was African American of the 23 in the last 10 years that our office has investigated. Does that answer your basic question?
It answers the basic one, and I will address
getting long-winded. That may be the other thing, too.
The audience had one that you may be more suited to answer for us, and it says, why are there no public trust laws? Should police who violate the public trust be incarcerated or executed?
And how do you define a public trust law if that person, yes, sir? Okay. Certainly our police are held to the same standards as any citizen. Unfortunately, since I've been in office, probably every single day we've had some charge against some police officer or sheriff's deputy within our 2 counties. Whether that's domestic violence, whether it's theft, whether it's been other things, use of force, whatever it may be, we've had it at different times. And again, we come in and do the investigations when it's normally done that. We then issue a report, and then at the end of the case, we also issue all of our investigative reports to the public if they want to review it, because public trust is so very important. And we've had discussions with law enforcement about that we need to make sure we're using something that people trust. They know it's a neutral group looking into it. I do believe, by the way, in the grand jury. I know that's been one that's been nationally talked about. Quite frankly, if you look at our Constitution, all criminal cases have to go through a grand jury in our Constitution, the United States Constitution. That was because our founding fathers had a distrust of government officials. They wanted the 12 citizens to decide whether charges should be brought or not. So today, even today in the federal government, every single criminal case has to go in front of a grand jury. Some states are that way. Texas, for instance, every single criminal case goes through a grand jury. Now, quite frankly, they're quite bogged down and behind on filing charges. Colorado is not that way, but I have the option of using the grand jury. I have used the grand jury in one investigation in one of our officer-involved shootings. Again, I trust the public. In fact, right now, some of you may be getting a notice. They're sending it out this month, notices to people to be on the grand jury. How many of you ever gotten a jury notice? It comes the same way, except it says grand on it. And so you may, if you got one this month, you may not have noticed the word grand. It is a one-year assignment, if you will, and you're randomly picked from the public, and whoever those 12 people are, that's who sits as our grand jury across El Paso and Teller counties. They do see some of the highest profile cases in this community. They take that job very seriously, very self-conscious about what they're doing. They are their own independent investigative body. When we go in front of them, my prosecutor is actually their attorney, and they can ask them to do things. Every law enforcement officer who shows up in front of them is their investigator, and usually at the end of each night's proceeding, they'll say, I want you to do this interview, or I want you to bring this witness in front of me, go subpoena him, or I want this test done that I've seen on CSI or whatever else. And they are then ordered by the grand jury and must follow what they're doing. And they are very diligent, very conscientious, and actually they find, even though it's a year long, it's a very rewarding experience for them. But I am a big believer in trusting the citizens of this community.
Thank you. So what we're going to do, I want to transition a little bit into, and I want to hear, because oftentimes we hear that as a community that maybe there's a sentiment that we don't connect with our young people, or that we don't connect in communities that we don't actually interact in. So I want to ask our student on the panel. We have a student, and you will know we tried to represent the areas in which we saw publicized the most in the media. So we have somebody that's going to talk about unemployment, employment opportunities from the business arena. We have the NAACP, we have a pastor, and so we're going to try to get all of those different areas in. Right now, I want to ask our student, Jerry Travis, JT, can you share with us some of your experiences? First, tell us a little bit about your background. I know that you're an athlete. And can you share a little bit with us some of your experiences or interactions with the police? And what do you think the police could do in an effort to build relationship with young black youth?
Okay, I'm Jerry Travis. I'm a student athlete down at Grand Canyon University. I grew up a military kid. My mom retired Air Force. I went to Pine Creek High School in Colorado Springs, North Colorado Springs. And my interactions with the police, they've been good when I'm dressed like this. But like I said, I'm a student athlete, so the majority of the time I'm in sweats or just basketball shorts or anything athletic wear. So in my interactions with the police, when I would just go say hi or, just try to get their, just a gesture from them, their reaction was kind of like, okay, why are you talking to me? Why are you kind of waving at me? It's like they felt threatened by me, which is that's disrespectful to me because I'm a law-abiding citizen, and it's like I don't have that respect from the police. So if I was placed in a situation such as the situation in Ferguson or anything like that, I would feel I'm just discomforted by the police. So I feel in that situation I don't feel safe by the ones that are here to protect and to serve me. So it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do if I'm in my athletic wear and I'm just happen to be in that, I guess, the wrong place at the wrong time. And it's kind of scary. But my advice to the police would just be, just gesture back at me. If I'm going to say hi to you, say hi to me. I'm a normal, a law-abiding citizen, as I said. Just gesture back to me. I'll have a conversation with you. I'm a nice guy. You don't have to be intimidated by me or anything like that. And I think this is helping a lot as well. Just being able to communicate, because a lot of it is lost in communication, because I'm going off of your reaction to me you've already reacted to me by judging me by the way I'm dressed, and I'm reacting to you by the way you respond to the way I gesture to you. So I would just say, just say hi, we have a conversation, but I wouldn't say go out of your way to address me or young black youth, because to me that's like, don't do anything dumb because I'm watching you, because you're just coming out of nowhere just to say hi or just try to talk to me. So, yeah.
Thank you. So what we want to do, and we want to kind of have the law enforcement weigh in, because that's a real perception from this student on his experiences in our community. And before we do that, we want Henry Allen, who's our current president of the NAACP, who'd like to also weigh in on JT's comment.
Thank you. I'm Henry Allen. First of all, good evening to all of you that braved the weather. And if you would, with me, just remember those two officers that we lost yesterday in Prairie, New York, doing their job. I can speak a little bit about law enforcement. I spent a little time with the sheriff's office, about 14 years, and I was a patrol deputy. If we're going to have a true conversation about race and issues in this country and in this city, let's start here in Colorado Springs. We do have a race issue here, and we do have some issues that we need to address on the law enforcement side of the house. Just real quick, with the outgoing sheriff, if none of you know, he spent 10 years, I spent 10 years under that, and only at no time were there black law enforcement that were assigned to patrol. Not one black law enforcement under Sheriff Makita got assigned to patrol. Now, he did hire more African Americans than CSPD did, but he kept them in the jail. So when you're dealing with people if you're going to fix this problem, then you need to put people that look like other folks on the road also. Now, I had this conversation with Mayor Bach when Chief Carey come on. Chief Carey had done an outstanding job in hiring African Americans and Hispanics and females because they go directly to patrol. Now, I've had this conversation again with the oncoming sheriff. There's got to be a change in talking about people, all of us, as we're going to survive in this community. You cannot continue to have young black men that are afraid of law enforcement because the only body he sees is someone that's white and powerful. You're going to have to change that perspective. Also, supervision. When you have undersheriffs, when you have bureau chiefs, and when you have commanders that don't hold their deputies to accountable and allow them to act in that manner, they will. They will. So you must hold that sheriff accountable. You must hold that chief accountable. Because if you bring folks with racist views, if you bring folks that don't have respect for nobody with the exception to look like them, you're going to have Ferguson here. You're going to have Ferguson in Colorado Springs. So the county commissioners, the city councilmen, chiefs, we all got to survive in this community together. I'm a civil rights guy. I got nothing every day but to check you, and that's what I'm going to do. It's my responsibility to ensure that every citizen, black, white, Hispanic, or green, lives in this community. Our young people should not be afraid of law enforcement. At no one time when I was a law enforcement that I come out of my car with the fact that I was going to put fear in a citizen's heart. Because no matter who we stop, who we contact, they still are citizens in this community and need to be treated that way.
Thank you so much, Henry. Now, as we get ready to move on, one of the things that I just want to bring to your attention, just from a statistical standpoint, and when we really look at the makeup, we want to look at the makeup of El Paso County in respect to, just so that you have some numbers for your head. I don't spend a lot of time there, but the makeup of El Paso County is about 84% white. We have about 6.8% black, and we have about 15.9% Hispanic. And the reason why this is relevant, because when we look at the makeup of our police force, one of the things that was the issue in Ferguson is, did their force reflect their population? And Ferguson has about 21,000, this is information from the 2013 U.S. Census, has about 21,111 people. And they have 6,206 that are white, 14,297 that are black, and 260 that are Hispanic. So when you look at a 70% population, and then you look at them having 3 law enforcement officers, those statistics don't match. But what we want to look at is in El Paso County, where do our statistics lie for our demographic population? Is our police force reflective for our community? So we want to make sure that we keep those things in the back of our mind. And I was wondering, do either of you law enforcement have statistics of the makeup of what our force looks like in comparison to the numbers that I just gave about our community? Officer Wilson, are you? Officer Wilson. So what he's going to tell us is, what do we look like here? What does our force, is our force reflective to our community?
Okay. Like she said, our black population is about 6%. Colorado Springs is about 4.54%. And I'll skip the 4.5, but it's about 5%. And our Hispanic population, our Hispanic employees are about 15%, so we're a little under there. Our biggest deficit, obviously, is females. We're at about 14%. Obviously, the population is 50%, so that's pretty much our worst demographic. I've been a recruiter for the last 6 years, so that's been my major focus the past 6 years, is women and minority officers. And I travel everywhere from Fort Collins to Pueblo, getting the word out there, but it's not as easy as people would think. Everyone thinks you should just open the application up and a bunch of folks, African Americans, Hispanics, will apply, but that's just not how it works. They have to want to be police officers first and foremost, and so that's a challenge. You know, especially with the relationship between the police and the black community, it is tough to find young African American males and females who want to be police officers, especially this time during what we're going through now, what law enforcement is going through. It's a challenge. So we do what we can. We had an education requirement, and we thought maybe that was hindering us. We used to require 60 college credits, but we since lowered that to 30 college credits, and it improved a little bit, but not as much as I would hope. So we are constantly trying to figure out how to reach out to minorities and women to get them to apply. And again, like Sheriff Evans said, we are always looking for the community to help us. If you can think of something that we can do better, or you have a suggestion on a way for us to actually reach those folks, we're open to any suggestions you may have.
Thank you. The next question is, one of the themes that we see across the nation is an economic disparity in some of these underserved communities. So we have Trevor Deerdorf, and excuse me if I butchered that, on our panel, who's an entrepreneur, who's the CEO and a businessman. And I'd like to pose the question to you. Unemployment and economic disparities tend to be a major concern for many underserved communities. We saw these disparities play out in Ferguson. Can you give us some insight as to what we can do within El Paso County to generate employment opportunities in parts of our community that continue to have a deficit or, lack decent employment opportunities? Trevor.
Thank you, Tico. My company, Amnet, provides IT services for other businesses here in town. The reason I tell you that is I'm plugged in through that to many employers here in town. I also am president of an organization called Middle Market Entrepreneurs, which serves our region's businesses that have got typically 20 to 200 employees. So I've kind of got my pulse on what's going on from an employer perspective in our community. And I will tell you, almost every employer I know has positions open that they can't fill. We do not have a lack of jobs. We have a lack of skilled talent out there. I'm looking for a network administrator right now, and I'm looking out of state. I can't find somebody locally with those skills. Tom Neppel at Springs Fab would hire 40 welders and machinists tomorrow if they would show up on his doorstep. Janska, clothing manufacturer here in town, they could fill 20 positions with sewers if they could find people that could sew. So the jobs are there. I think that we've spent decades telling kids if they don't go to college, they're not going to make a living, so the trades have been largely neglected. We don't have young people in the trades anymore, and these employers are desperate to find people. I know Tom Neppel, they're paying 50 to 80 grand for experienced, skilled welders. These are good jobs. So I think that we need to continue to tell our kids that education is still the way up, but it's not necessarily college. Not every kid is suited for college, and there are good paying jobs, good jobs in the trades. So I think that would probably be a good step.
Thank you. So we'll have a couple more questions, and then we're going to switch our form, and we have plenty of questions from the audience. But before we do that, I was wondering if Pastor Reginald Cox, could answer a question for us. In times like these, what is the church's role when there's an incident within the community, a tragic incident? And I know that you have 4 sons. What is some of the advice that you and or your wife have given to them as it pertains to interacting with the police?
First of all, in light of what has transpired in New York with the 2 police officers who were killed, can we give our law enforcement officials a round of applause for the work that they do? It doesn't have to be a Ferguson here. Amen. I fell in love with this city the moment that I was stationed here at NORAD, Northern Command, and we feel safe here. And it's because of the men and women who serve, who are on the front line protecting us. And just to answer your question about my 4 boys, even my daughter who is here, I tell them to respect law enforcement. If they're pulled over, it's yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, sir. No, ma'am. We don't escalate the incident. Amen. We're very respectful. Amen. We want to get in and get out as quickly as possible. And one of the things, I grew up in New York. I was born in Queens, lived in New York for 12 years of my life, lived in Brooklyn, Coney Island, a lot which has transpired on the news. I've lived there. My mother moved us to Birmingham, Alabama, which is probably the mecca of civil rights. And so I've seen a lot even as a child. And I had my oldest brother was murdered about a block away from my mother's home. So I have a stake in this, but from a different perspective, from a faith-based perspective. I have taken on the message of the late Martin Luther King Jr., who had a message of nonviolence. And regardless of what it looks like, regardless of what it sounds like, regardless of my own passions and feelings, my message is always going to be nonviolence. And I believe that people of faith, we need to be intertwined when there's chaos, when there's confusion, when there's hurt and there's pain. Somebody has to be sounding the beacon of hope. Somebody has to be sounding the beacon of forgiveness, rising above it, moving forward. And I believe that that is the message for people of faith, that we have to intertwine ourselves, be on the front line with others, and de-escalate the situation and not escalate it. I believe Martin Luther King has been very successful in his approach. A lot of us, amen, are living his dream today, but I believe that a lot of his voice has been silenced nowadays because we often don't hear the nonviolence, and we look at our local enforcement as being our adversary and not our fellow citizen. And so I believe that our message, we ought to be a bridge and bring us together and not divide us.
Thank you, Pastor Cox. Okay, before we shift, to our audience questions, and we have a lot of them, I wondered if Lynn Lee would take an opportunity to kind of, she is the chair of Pikes Peak Restorative Justice Council, which is an intervention. And so I was wondering, Ms. Lee, if you would mind giving us a brief overview for those who are not familiar with restorative justice. What is it, and what is it that our law enforcement and that our community can do to help it be more successful?
Well, thank you. And thank you for including me on the panel. And I appreciate you all coming out here tonight in such crummy weather. I also sit on the State Restorative Justice Council, and I just want to take a minute to recognize the families of all of those people who've lost their lives. Not only the families of the 2 police officers in New York, but the families of all of those young men who have been killed in the last 6 months. When I watch the news, and it's really relentless, it's really difficult to watch the pain and the frustration, the anger that people are experiencing. And when I watch that, I think about restorative justice. And maybe the most familiar restorative justice would be Bishop Tutu's Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. That's probably the most worldwide known example of restorative justice. So it's an opportunity to bring people together on both sides of an issue. I think as citizens, we've always relied on the judicial system to take care of those things for us, but the judicial system isn't set up to bring people together. And that's what restorative justice does. It brings people together in a safe environment to tell their stories, to talk about repairing the harm when that's appropriate, and to create a place for people to build relationships or restore relationships if they've been harmed. I would really like you all to take a minute. I wonder what brought you here tonight. Why are you all here? Obviously, I can't hear that from all of you, but I think I agree that we haven't had those difficult conversations. I think restorative justice is a place to have those difficult conversations, and I think we really need to have them. What is the conversation that you would like the person behind you to hear? What's the story that you'd like the person in front of you to hear? I'm really hoping that after tonight we can create a place to bring restorative justice in the community to have those kinds of conversations.
Thank you. And before we go to the audience, I do have one question for Anthony Perez, CEO of Success as a Language. And I was wondering if you might be able to share just briefly, and then we have questions for a lot of you from the audience that I want to make sure that we get through the majority of their questions. But if you can tell us, what are some of the challenges that you see facing the Hispanic community?
Well, you and I spoke about it, and it was to piggyback what Pastor was saying about folks being able to de-escalate a situation. Well, that also is saying that folks have the ability and the skills, if we're talking about youth or just grown adults, that they have the skills to be aware of their emotions and know how to handle themselves in those situations. Not one person in this room is themselves when those lights are on you. And whether it's a Hispanic community, African American community, let's be very clear, it's not just a race issue, it's a zip code issue, and we all know that, okay? It's a case of, when I lived outside of Chicago before I moved here, I was in a predominantly Hispanic area. And though I would do trainings for the Chicago Police Department and sit on committees and do trainings and was in a suit, you know what? I'd be unshaven in a pair of chucks and a pair of jeans walking down to the corner store. Now, if I was on the north side, it'd be hip, right? However, I saw the undercover squads, who, by the way, were not Hispanic undercover police officers in that neighborhood. I saw them driving by 2 or 3 times. I know why they were driving by. I know what I do for a living. I know what I do. But I also, they were profiling me. And you know, as we touched on the Hispanic community, and we said the numbers twice, moving here from Chicago, I noticed right away, you know, number 2 in demographics, 16%. You go to a Denver, you go to a West Palm, a Miami, a Chicago, a larger area, you know what? You know there's representation of those communities. You know why? Because you see them. As I was telling my friend Mr. Wilson here, you know, part of it, you know, trust is so important in a community. Whether it's in your home all the way down to a community, trust is the bedrock of good things. If I knew he didn't care for me and he invited me to his party because I lived on his block, I'm not going. So when your leadership from the top down makes our community feel devalued over and over again, we had a conversation. We've been talking about it with United Way. United Way has a great program called Cradle to Career that we're on the task force, and we're working on some serious issues about economics and education. And one of the statements at our last meeting was, well, you know, we invite people to the table. We invite them to the table and they don't come. Well, of course they're not going to come. If you don't feel that it's sincere, if you think that you're just going through the motion, I'm going to take care of what I got to take care of, my family, what I can control. And after you keep hitting your head against the wall, I believe restorative justice is a great way to get people in the room to at least start having the dialogue like we are here today. So, you know, one thing that I see in the Hispanic community since being here, because I've done work in Florida, right, Chicago, and one big thing is that I see in those areas different from here is those communities, and in Denver, those communities, you see the Hispanic Latino community out, moving forward. We need to, if we're really serious about trust, valuing people. I've talked with city council folks, city officials, and they've told me point blank, you know, the representation of the minorities is really out of balance in elected council, in leadership, and on committees. And that's the truth. You know, and trust, it's about perspective. Your perspective is your reality. Your perspective of what you see going on here, in the newspaper, in your community. You know, regardless of what your feelings are about Ferguson, NAACP invited a number of people out to a remembrance ceremony a couple weeks back. And I'm glad to see a lot of the law officers that are here, councilmen, who did attend. But there were a lot of people that were invited. A lot of people that are looking for votes to be your new mayor were invited, that not only did not show up, regardless of your feelings, because that's not what that event was about. That event was about starting a dialogue. But they didn't even reply. So what my perspective to that is that that's unacceptable. So as a community, we have to continue doing what we're doing here. Whether you're black, brown, white, polka dot, getting through the snow, I want to acknowledge you for being here.
Yes,
because
thank you.
that's a big reason why most people say, I'm not coming. It's going to be the same old, same old. But we got to get out of our comfort zone to be seen by community leaders, hold them accountable so they start valuing what you want, your concerns.
Thank you. Okay. So now what we're going to do, we're going to switch over, and what you're going to hear now are the questions in which you, the community, and the audience has to address to the panel. And we have some specific questions that are addressed to each one of you. Now, as we do this portion, to get as many questions addressed as we can, I ask that the panelists would limit their response to 1 to 2 minutes where that's appropriate, okay? And we're going to try to get through as many of the audience questions as we can. So this question is to Chief Todd Evans. I understand the hurdles with money and training, but how do you plan to fix or change this? What do you need from us, the community?
You know, I think one of the biggest things we need, and the pastor hit on it very eloquently, we had a graduation last Friday night of the Pikes Peak Community College Law Enforcement Academy. And when we spoke to them, we told them that what we need to move forward and to take our profession to the next level is ambassadors. That's what we need. We don't need a bunch of folks coming into our profession that just want to run out and arrest and wear a badge and a gun. We don't need that anymore. So I think what we need to do from our level is we need to figure out how we can institute truly into our evaluation system if a cop is an ambassador or not. And if they are not, if they are making this gentleman feel uncomfortable, because I'll be quite honest with you, they do that with me a lot of times. Cops that have worked the streets for a long time, I'm just going to be honest with you, they get burnt out. You can see it through the divorce rate. You can see it through the suicide rates, especially in the bigger cities. You can see, and you don't really understand it until you get out there. When you're out there every night and your job is to go into people's homes and fix things that could have been 15 years in the making, it's almost an impossible job, folks. It's impossible. But part of the challenge for us at the heads of our agencies is how do we now find out who is not an ambassador? Who is out there doing that? And we truly make that part of our evaluation system. And then when we identify them, we give them an opportunity. We let them know that you're out there and you're not being an ambassador. You're not meeting the level of customer service. You're making individuals feel uncomfortable. We can see that. We can feel that. And then we need to be able to justify and let them know if you're not going to get to that level, then we're going to get you out of this career field. I feel very strongly about that. My wife is a Gonzalez. She was born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She routinely gets contacted. I shouldn't say routinely. She might get mad at me. But she often gets stopped on traffic stops. First thing she wants to say is, well, that guy wasn't real nice to me. Well, his job is writing tickets all day, right? My daughter, she gets her license. She gets her first ticket only ticket, because she lost her car for about 6 months. First thing she said was, Dad, he was mean to me, right? Look at the shiny thing over here. You probably know what she heard in our household. Could care less, what were you doing? But understanding, I had to have that explanation to them. These guys are out there, and their job is every day to give traffic tickets. Every contact they have is a difficult contact, because you're right, all of us act different. Even we do. We just had a discussion about that tonight. If those red and blues are behind us, whoop, we go into a different mode too. It's just a natural reaction. It takes me back when I was 16 driving in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Bad thing. And my uncle was a cop down there. So specifically to the answer of that, we have to come up with a new way of evaluating our ambassadors who are out there. And if they're not doing that for everyone, regardless of any type of bias, diversity, then we need to figure out a way to get them out of the career field and not let them continue to do that in the public. That's our challenge, and we have to do that. We've got to commit to doing that.
Thank you. Next question, Pastor Cox. Why did you decide to speak today? Why is this a problem that we need to discuss?
I welcome the invitation to be here. I think it's necessary.
for people of faith to have a voice. This is our community, and we love our community. And, you know, I really believe that we can make a difference. And I look at us as being the officials in the midst of an intense football game. You got two people that are battling, they both want to win, but somebody's got to regulate the game. And we don't pick winners and losers because we comply with our own set of code book, and that's the Word of God. And that's supposed to promote love and forgiveness and things of that nature. So in the absence of the team of officials, there's chaos on the field. And that's what we're seeing is a lot of chaos on the field. And so we got to be on our job and properly officiate the game.
Thank you. Sheriff-elect Bill Elder. I'm sorry, Bill. How are you and your department going to deliberately collaborate with the school systems, middle schools, high schools, to build a level of trust between law enforcement and our African American boys? It is critical for our young men not to see law enforcement as an adversarial role. As an educator and a mother, I am extremely concerned.
Okay. One of the first things that we're going to do, and we've been doing this in Fountain, and we've involved the Colorado Springs Police Department as well, is we have an outreach program that goes into the schools, and we teach safety issues. We have roundtables that we teach safety issues in the schools. The second thing is we're going to expand our programs that involve youth. We had a discussion tonight, and I'll let Pete talk a little bit about this new program that we're working on for high school students to become ambassadors for the community at that level. It's important, and we know that. But to make a commitment, like Henry said earlier, we are committed to this change. I've committed to the point that one of my bureau chiefs, the third in command of the sheriff's office, is African American. The commander of my patrol division, Cliff Northam, is African American. And we will hire an African American to be a recruiter like Rob. We are going to work hard to change the face of the sheriff's office. We don't want those kinds of relationships like JT talked about. I grew up here. I've lived here since I was 10. I went to Palmer High School downtown. This is my community. I raised my children here. I'm watching my grandchildren be raised here. Like the pastor said, we're very, very proud of our community. We can't have young black men, young Hispanic men and women. We can't have you afraid of us in law enforcement. That's not how we do business. I didn't get into this business to make people afraid. I got into this business to help. Every single one of us gets into this business to help our community. We've gone through tremendous loss in this community. And when you see one of your friends die, like Hugh Martin, that is a very difficult thing to go through. I get it. You know, I see Pastor Haggard here tonight, and he helped us put together the funeral for Hugh Martin. We don't need that in this community. We need to have that interaction that stops the fear between young men and women of color and law enforcement. You know, Darrell Green, I'll talk about him again, and Darrell is, I'll let you talk about what it is that you do for Fountain PD and how you can help in the future build the relationship between law enforcement and the minority communities.
Make sure my gig line is straight here.
Would you give everybody your title, please?
I'm Sergeant Darrell Green with the Fountain Police Department. As Sheriff Elder said, I was recruited to come to Fountain from a department way up north.
Just to give you guys a little breakdown of this department that I came from, there was about 200 cops, and I was the only African American. In fact, I was the first African American that had been there in 38 years. So I dealt with a lot. I had a lot of struggles. I spent 9 years there, more out of being stubborn than anything else. I learned a lot there. I learned how to deal with adversity. I learned how to deal with people who didn't understand me, understand the color of my skin, my background. I learned how to communicate, which is the most important thing. I am from this area. I'm from Whitefield, Colorado. Went to elementary school there, junior high, high school there. So when they recruited me to come back here, one of the things that I told them that I wanted to do was to bring my experiences to Fountain, to make sure Fountain didn't experience anything that I had to go through. I'm just going to say the department. It's Greeley PD is where I was at. In fact, it's funny that we're having this panel. I was contacted 2 weeks ago from the University of Northern Colorado and asked to sit on their panel in January because of some of the issues they're having. Greeley is majority Hispanic white, so I was kind of the odd duck there. So I usually sat in the middle while there was a lot of things that were going on. Luckily, I had a deputy chief and a chief who were open to my crazy ideas. One of the things that I did is I took over their school resource officer unit. I told Chief, at that time we had 2 school resource officers. I told him that I wanted to grow the unit out. He said, that's fine, but we don't have the money to do it. You got to find the money. I said, all right. Within 6 months, I had it up to 8 officers. I believe that our youth is probably the most important place to start when it comes to dealing with these issues. It hasn't been that long ago. People tend to believe that racism doesn't exist. It's still there, believe me. Civil Rights Act of 1964, 65, 68, that's not that long ago. Those people are still around, those ideas are still around. It's just more covert instead of overt now. Like I said, I had 2 very good people to listen to my ideas. When Sheriff Elder got the position of sheriff, I threw some projects at both of them that I thought would be great to help build this gap between the community and law enforcement. And I can only speak to you as a black man. I'm sorry, that's my experiences. That's what I've dealt with, that's what I know. So I had to walk on 2 lines, as a cop and as a black man. I tell people, the best compliment that I get is I don't act like a cop. And I tell people I've never really been treated like one. Yeah. Some of these projects, hopefully in the next year, will start to raise their head. One of the things that I brought up is I'd like to see us develop a community safety village, something for kids where they can go through, where they can experience safety lessons from police, safety lessons from fire. They can actually sit down in a classroom and talk to police officers and firemen about what they do and why they do what they do. So they can see exactly what our job entails. Go through a tour. We have to educate our young to start our change there, because sometimes you get ingrained in your ways and it's hard to change. But hopefully you guys will be seeing my face around a lot in the next year or so. Speaking as being an African American law enforcement officer, I'm also a captain in the Air Force Reserves. Speaking from a military side, there's not a lot of African American officers in the military. In fact, I believe there's probably even less in the military than there are in law enforcement. I've gone on bases where I was the only sole one. And we got to find a way to bridge that gap.
Thank you. Officer Wilson. I'm surprised the officer's really getting a lot of questions here. Do police officers approach African Americans differently from how they approach white people?
Well, I can't speak for other departments, but in our department, we don't. We don't approach anybody. We don't just randomly contact citizens. If we do, we have a reason to do so. And so when we contact them, there's always going to be certain things that police officers are going to ask. We're always going to ask to see your hands. And some people find like maybe we're violating their constitutional rights, but that is more for our safety than anything. If somebody's going to use a gun or a knife, they're more likely going to use their hands to use it against us. So seeing your hands doesn't completely put me at ease, but it does help me relax and do my job knowing that you don't have a weapon that you're going to use against me. So we're always going to ask to see your hands. We're more likely going to always ask to see your identification. We need to know who we're talking to and who we're dealing with. It's important if you're a violent felon and you're wanted or you have warrants, that's important information for me to know. So we're always going to ask for ID. Now, a lot of people, and especially on Facebook, I think the wrong message is going out. Now we're trying to teach young people you don't have to listen to the cops. You don't have to comply. It's a violation of their rights to stop you, and I think that's kind of compounding the problem. If we contact a youth in our city, regardless of how they feel about the contact, whether they agree, disagree, right or wrong, I think it's important that they just comply. We're not gonna give them false charges. We're not gonna do anything to them. Once we go through our investigation, if they haven't done anything, we're gonna let them go. We're not gonna trump up charges or do anything like that or try to intentionally hurt anybody. But we have a reason to contact them, and we're gonna contact them because we're police officers. That's what we do. There's a process in place that if I contact somebody and I'm not professional or I'm disrespectful or I'm using profanity or anything like that, there's a process in place for people to lodge a complaint. Everybody in CSPD has a supervisor, which in layman's term, we all got bosses. So if I go out here and I do something inappropriate, you can talk to my supervisor and that complaint will be taken. All complaints are taken with CSPD. It's our policy. We don't decide, well, that complaint's valid, that one's not valid. If somebody calls in with a complaint, we have a complaint process and we take that complaint. So and this young man, when he was talking about his experience, I was praying, please don't be talking about CSPD. I hope he wasn't, but if he is talking about CSPD, that bothers me. I don't think our officers should be making people afraid. We shouldn't be putting people in fear. So for that young man and anybody else, if you're fearful for the police and it's just part of who you are, there's really nothing we can do about it. But if it's something that we're doing, you have to hold us accountable for that. The community is the reason we're here. That's why we're in business, to protect and serve the community. You shouldn't be afraid of us for us to do our job.
Thank you.
Tico, can I just add a quick sentence on that?
Sure. Can we have somebody get this lady down here a card? I think she's going to have to answer questions, so we need to submit that through index card, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
About 6 years ago, the state of Colorado passed a state law, and if you're not aware of it, I just want to mention it real quickly. If you're stopped by a police officer in the state of Colorado and you don't get a ticket, and that officer is required by law to give you his business card to say, hey, I'm Officer Pete Carey. I'm the person that stopped you. So if you have a problem with his or her conduct, you'll know who you were dealing with. So if you're ever stopped, it's okay, and you don't get a ticket, that's a good thing. If you get a ticket, you'll have probably a court date and the name of the officer. But if you think it was inappropriate or there was no reason why that officer stopped you or there was some other issue, that person should be giving you a business card with their name on it, and if not, you can ask for it. A lot of people don't know that, and that's been in effect now for, I think, about 6 years, Bill? Todd?
Yeah, and I'll say something else real quick that kind of tags along with that. If in the evenings or the nighttime hours, and I think I can speak for CSPD and Fountain and the Sheriff's Office as well, if you're being stopped and you don't feel safe, slow down below the speed limit so it doesn't appear that you're trying to get away, and pull to a well-lighted spot. This happens a lot. Be safe. Be safe.
Thank you. This question is to Lynn Lee. Several panelists have alluded to the fact that there is a problem with the PD and young black males, but no one has offered a solution. We'd like to hear your perspective on possible solutions.
I think for me in restorative justice, that solution comes out of meeting together like I said before, people on both sides of the issue, so the police department, representatives from the police department, as well as people who have stories that they need to tell. And it's a process that allows you to tell your story, and then together people decide how the harm needs to be repaired. And it's a way to develop trust and create relationships, restore relationships. So I believe that that's a process that can be really helpful in bringing us together in our communities.
Thank you so much. Now this one is multifaceted. It says, I'd like to ask how many of you on this panel have been profiled or violated by the law enforcement in El Paso County? And how do you regain public trust when the public feels that you are disingenuous? How is this new sheriff different from Terry Makita and his blatant disregard for the law?
Multifaceted.
I said it was fully loaded.
That's not one I can share with these other guys. How is this sheriff different? Wow. How do I do that delicately? I'm completely different. I'm nowhere near the same. Like I said, I grew up here. I don't respond to things the same way. You won't see me making Facebook posts. I'm really trying to be difficult. I think I can ask Todd, who's known me forever. I can ask Pete, who's known me for 30-some years. I babysat his kids when they were little. I can ask. Maybe it might be better to let them talk a little.
Yeah, let me address that. I don't know who addressed that, but let me tell you why I supported this individual and how he's different. I've worked with both of those individuals.
Excuse me, Chief. Could you tell us which portion of the question that you're addressing so the audience knows, since it was so many parts?
Different. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm going to address the different part. Even when you're a politician, it's tough to get up here and talk about yourself sometimes. But let me tell you about him as a deputy chief, which I think will tell you the difference in those two individuals. When Bill talked about the processes that we've done down in our city, and our city's 30,000, we're approaching 30,000 in Fountain, but the pillars of how you connect with your community is no different in a city of 30,000 than it is in one of 500,000. You have to have those same pillars. So this individual, this gentleman, has not only talked the talk, but when we went out and two of our community leaders down there, Pastor Daniels and Reverend McMurrin, when those two gentlemen have an issue, or our officers have an issue in our city, which occurs, they call us personally, and if I'm not able to meet with them, then Bill meets with them every time. We have never turned that, nor have we, Henry, or anyone else that calls us. And when we have gone out and done those community programs, this individual was out there in his ratty clothes, and he was out there in those 30-yard dumpsters as we were taking senior citizens, regardless of their race, as we were taking what they needed for us to take off their property and out of their house. We were taking truckloads, and we had him in one of those dumpsters as we were getting the trash to him so we could fill as much as we could possibly fill. Now, you tell me when you ever saw Terry Makita out there doing that. That's something that you can't talk the talk. You're out there walking the walk. When we built the park connected to New Jerusalem Church, Bill was out there turning dirt. He was out there taking, and we were out there sweating and putting that work in, along with our brothers in the community. We were out there doing that together. We had the deacons out there with us, and it was the first time when we dedicated that church that I've ever spoken in public and cried at the same time. And a lot of people were out there watching it because I was so proud of what he did. And I knew that we had a different individual going into that office. And again, I've worked with both of them. So when we talk the talk, when we're standing up here and we make commitments to the pastor and to this young gentleman, I know that this individual, once he says it, we're also going to follow through and we're going to do it. So it's easier for me to talk about him and vice versa than for him to say those things. But I can tell you, through connecting with our community down there, the pillar is the same. And if he doesn't bring that same concept and that same philosophy here, not only will you hold him accountable, we will as well. So we are all quality control. That's what we do.
Well, and the other thing, too, is that Darrell, and what Darrell didn't tell you before is we were friends before I went back into law enforcement, and I made an overt act to reach out to Darrell to bring him back, to have him help our community. And I think it's been one of the best things you've ever done, is to come back to our community. Tico, what else was part of that question so I can hit it all?
Sorry.
Profile. No, I've never. No.
Actually, that was a question that was generated to the panel. So
Okay.
the question for the panel was: has anyone on the panel been profiled or violated by law enforcement? And how do we regain public trust when the public feels that the police or law enforcement is disingenuous?
Yes, I have been racially profiled. Like I said, I'm an athlete. I have other African American friends on my team that are athletes. You know, these guys they're kind of bigger. One's like 6'2", 220. Another guy's a little shorter, stockier guy. And when we hang out, we just go to the store, Walmart, downtown. Is just kind of like we're being watched. And even if we're just walking downtown, I feel like cops are just they're just circling the area, and it's like they're only ones. Like we're the only. Well, it's like we're being targeted, kind of. And what was the second part of that question?
Well, is there anybody that could respond to how do we build the trust when you have situations such as JT is explaining to us? Is there any law enforcement that has a specific example of how we build that trust from, okay, just one second, any current law enforcement that has a relationship, just one second, Henry, you can chime in on this, that any current law enforcement that currently now wears a uniform, how can we tell JT that what are some of the things that we can do to kind of close a gap and maybe reach out to him? If any of the current law enforcement would like to address that.
I'll jump into that, and I know there'll be others who want to add on to that. So I said this probably 15, 20 years ago as a new supervisor. I think that the best cops are the ones that are most comfortable dealing with people that aren't exactly like them. They're the ones that do best in the police world. Besides being problem solvers, they're comfortable with people that aren't exactly like them. That's what I look for in a police officer. The most important thing I can do as a police chief is to make sure I pick the very best people that are going to be police officers, in a few years sergeants, lieutenants, and someday replace me. Most important thing. The second most important thing I do is a quality of enforcement. Depending on what zip code you're in or what part of town you're in, it should be the same and it should be consistent. As it relates to how we deal with people day in and day out, it's a matter of making sure our officers are accountable and that they're doing the right things, whether they think they're being watched or not. I think at some point tonight someone may ask something about whether or not there's a value in Colorado Springs and in this community of body-worn cameras. Does that make the community more accountable and our officers more accountable? I think so. I'm proud to say I've known Bill a long time, and he and Todd have already instituted body-worn cameras in Fountain. We're going through a testing process in Colorado Springs, and I think it's a no-brainer. In a few years, people will chuckle about police officers not having cameras on. The details are very important on cameras. When do I get to turn them on and turn them off? How do I protect people's privacy and things like that? So we're about 3 months into it, and that's what we're working out. But I throw that on the table as something that we're looking at very closely.
Could somebody chime in, just a question that it was here, Henry, I'm not ignoring you, a question they wanted to know, what do you all think about the use of body cameras?
We like it. In Fountain, every one of the Fountain officers now has a body-worn camera. We have had them now 2.5 years, almost 3 years. We just went to a brand new model that's supposedly more viable than what we've had before. They're difficult to use sometimes. They don't always face what you want to record, and they don't always record when you think they're recording. They're like any other piece of equipment, and they're not cheap. And how you respond or how you deal with that piece of equipment is different. I love the idea. We've talked about it already with my incoming staff. We will more than likely, very, very soon, have cameras on everybody in the Sheriff's Office Patrol Division anyway.
I'm very optimistic about it. I'm cautiously optimistic. The devil's in the details as far as protecting people's privacy and things like that. And to be honest with you, I want to make sure our officers are tight on when they turn them on and when they turn them off. As a police officer, you shouldn't be able to make that decision if you think you don't want it to be recorded. So we're working through those details. If you're somebody who has a home, an officer comes in, and he's there to talk to somebody about something. How do you feel about a camera being in your home and recording? They're the things we got to work through. So we're getting closer on it, and we're actually developing really, really good policy. Like I said, I think in a couple of years it'll be a no-brainer. I think our officers will have cameras, and the citizens and the public will expect that. If I go in to take care of a bar fight and I'm dealing with somebody who's intoxicated, and I get called to that bar and I say, hey, how you doing? I'm Officer Pete Carey. The bar owner called me in because there's a problem and he described you. I want to let you know before we start talking I have a camera and it's turned on. Depending on how drunk they are, I think that's going to get their attention. And I think they may act differently. And our officers should be aware of that too.
Well, and I think that everybody in here recognizes that there's always two stories, and we don't always get the right story from either party a lot of times. And this is just one of those things that will help us verify the truth instantly. This is like watching Monday Night Football, and they throw the flag, and everybody yells and screams and throws something at and we go back to the instant replay. This will be our form of instant replay. We hope this tells a better picture on both sides.
Having said that, there are police departments throughout the country, post-Ferguson, that have issued hundreds and hundreds of cameras without a sentence of policy. Well, when an officer turns them on and turns them off, I'm not going to be one of those police departments. We're going to do this well. We're going to do it right. And we're going to say this is when you turn it on, this is when you turn it off, and this is how you store the data, how long you store it, and all those things. We're going to do it right. But we're about halfway through the process right now.
Well, and we go back to the same thing with the equipment question from before. How often do agencies use the equipment that they've got? You know, some have tasers, some don't. Some agencies have cameras, some don't. And, you know, like what Pete says is that, you know, he wants to make sure that the policy is clean and specific, and everybody understands that policy, and it's enforceable. And we at the Sheriff's Office want to do the same thing. We developed a policy in Fountain that we believe will work, but it will change. We decided to push the cameras out a little bit early, but we still have a policy that the officers need to follow.
Thank you. Henry, if I can get you to divert your last comment and answer a question for me from the audience. Would you mind doing that for me? Thank you. Okay. Being a leader within your respective communities, how can we do a better job in ensuring communities maintain self-order? Not quite sure about the rest of it, but go ahead. Can you start with that? Yes, please. Let's follow protocol, sir. Thank you.
The thing that I talk too loud for that. We as a community need to vote. We as a community need to get out and maintain who we are voting for. In April, we have a mayor election coming. In April, we have city council. It is time, and I'm talking to people of color, black and brown people. You have to look at those folks that are going to be inclusive of us on their staff, on their ability to come to our community and speak to us. I have a hard time when politicians only come into my church in November or a little before November to get a vote. That allows me to believe that you really don't care about me. You just want to vote. Now, all of us in this room here, real quick, is that again, I preach this. We are not going to become anything until we do it together. Not one of us or not one individual race is going to be successful in this nation. You know, I watched a movie here a couple of nights ago. I woke up with I'm an old combat vet there. I woke up and down. I watched Mandela's Long Walk. And that just was inspiring to me how he made sure that after all these times in Robben Island, his thing was this country was going to survive together. And the only way to do that is we unite and have an honest discussion about race. It happened in the 50s and the 60s. Folks, we got to talk about black, brown, white, and what we're going to do together, not for us, but for our children and grandchildren. We have got to have that conversation. Now, you talk about how do we hold law enforcement accountable. You know, I talked to Pete Carey, Chief Pete Carey. I've talked to Sheriff-elect Bill Elder. I talked to my great friend Todd Evans. I even go to the mayor's office and city council because it's important to me in this non-paying job. It's important to me in this non-paying job that we all have a voice in this community. But we can't sit back and think somebody else is going to do it. If there's an issue with law enforcement, I don't want to be inundated with calls to call either one of those, but I don't have a problem picking up the phone, telling Ms. Wilson, I need your chief to call me back, telling somebody else to have somebody call me back. But we have got to survive together in this community. There's no way. Without each of us working together, this community won't continue to be the best community that we want it to be. But it's got to be black, brown, white, and we can't be afraid of each other. Amen. It can't be fear. And I'm going to leave it with this. I was in Ferguson for 4 days. Ferguson issue was fear. Law enforcement didn't respect that community, and that community lost respect for its law enforcement officers. They saw a hassle. They saw it became a war ground. When I walked and talked to them and went to Michael's gravesite and talked to the community, it was actually a combat zone for them, and it was them against the police. But also, it was the police against them. Colorado Springs, look at the dynamics. Don't let it come that way, because if it does come this way, then you are Ferguson number 2.
Thank you, Henry. How many elected officials do we have in the House? If you're an elected official, would you stand up? If you're a law enforcement agent, would you stand up? All of our law enforcement. If you're a person of faith, would you stand up? Give an applause, because this is your community that came out tonight. This is your community that came out, not because of fear, but because they care about their community. Thank you, everybody, for that. So I've got one more question, and then we're going to give each participant on the panel, give us suggestions. Think about that while we're answering this last question. 1 or 2 minutes to tell us, what are some things, what are your suggestions that we can do? This is the question I want you to think about. In 2 minutes or less, what are your suggestions to make police and community relations better? So we're going to go through each person but the last question goes to Pastor Cox. And the question is, as a regular member of the minority community, where the perception is black lives don't matter, what can I do to work on changing this view in minority communities so that we don't see the police as the enemy?
Thank you for the question. I believe that black lives, as you know, do matter. I believe that us as an African American population, our lives have to matter to us as well. Amen. And when I see 400 killings a year in Chicago, where we're killing each other, amen, we have to show our community as a whole that we matter to us as well. And so I just believe that by not just speaking it, but actually doing it and manifesting it, amen, and living it, amen, and being that example to the rest of the community, because we all matter in the eyes of God, amen, and because we all matter in the eyes of God, I believe that we have to come to the table and work together and to solve our common problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Cox. So at this time, what I'd like to do, and I really need everybody to keep this to 1 to 2 minutes, right? All right, let's do this, because I want the audience to have an opportunity to hear from everybody. So preferably 60 seconds, but okay. So the reminder of the question to the audience that I want each panel member to answer is, what are your suggestions to make police and community relations better? Now, no audience, I want you to know that this is an initial dialogue that we're trying to open up. We're trying to bring your leaders in front of you, and they're here because they want to be accountable. We didn't have one problem with anybody. Everybody on this panel wanted to be here. And so we want to make sure that we keep this. This is initial, meaning that now we're putting out some facts. We want to work together. We want unity in this community. And I'm fully persuaded that God is able to do that. I'm fully persuaded of that. So if you would start and we come all the way down, please.
I'm gonna reiterate what I said earlier. We really need your help. And when I say that is sometimes we hear folks say that the police need to change. We need to change, we need to change. but we don't get those specific solutions. Because what you don't want to do is tell us we need to change. Because remember, we're people too. We need your help on what do we need to change. So I think Tico mentioned it. You've got the three heads of the largest three agencies of law enforcement in our county sitting here tonight. And I will again say for all three of us, we will not turn down the offer of can we come out and talk to a group. So when you're with your groups, please invite us. Please have us come in. And all we would ask is when we're there with you, let us know what those solutions are with you. You're going to see more community outreach in the next 4 months than you ever have before. So we're going to reach out to you as individuals, the Mr. Prezes of the world, those type of things as he talked about, and we're going to say we need your help doing this as well. So it's got to go back and forth. But please, if you say what we need to change, give us specific solutions, and then we can sit down together, figure out what those parameters are, and put them into works. If not, we really don't know what you want to see.
Thank you, Chief.
You got me on a timer?
You specifically on a timer.
I'll get you on a timer.
Henry and I are close friends.
Yeah, do that. You know,
AV just turned his mic off after 2 minutes.
When they elected me as the president of the, and that's disrespectful for me to sit in front of you. When they elected me as the president of NACP, I had no idea what I was doing. But I knew it in my heart that it was something that God had put me here to do, a full-time job with no pay. With no pay, full-time. I drive from Peyton, Colorado to my shop every morning, keep that shop open for 10 to 12 hours a day answering complaints. There's a reason for all of us to exist on this earth as human beings. There's a reason for all of you in the room because you care. When you leave here this evening, let's continue to have that dialogue. Let's continue to speak about what we can do best for our community. Let's talk about what we can do for our grandbabies so they'll have a better community after we leave here. We cannot do that by fear. We cannot do that by separating ourselves in our community, leaving the south side of the city to die as long as the north side of the city prosper. If we all don't prosper together, then we all perish together. And so Al here from Lamborn's office, him and I have a conversation all the time about things. Pete Lee and Tony Eximo's always over the NACP office talking about things. Those folks care. You just got to reach out to them. Those folks, let's get past the political spectrum here. Let's get past Republicans and Democrats and Tea Party. Let's look at us as Americans. Can we leave a room tonight and say we all Americans? Say we all Americans, we want this nation to be great. If we can commit to that, we can get past everything else. If we can commit to that we are the powerful nation on this earth, and the only somebody that can destroy us is ourselves. Once we get past that, we will continue to be the greatest nation on this earth. Thank you. My 2 minutes is up. God bless all of you. If you ever need me, hey, tweet at me at the NACP office. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Mr. Perez.
Interesting. When I go around and working with police departments in Florida and Chicago and school districts, it was really interesting to me when I work with education, the challenges of the us against them mentality that schools and parents have. And it doesn't matter what state you are. I go to Denver, I go to Florida, I go to Chicago, and especially if I'm speaking about my Hispanic community, a lot the feedback I get is I don't feel welcome. And that's kind of a national thing. There's a challenge there, especially in certain areas. I'm a big football connoisseur, right? Coaches, I love watching learning from all the great coaches. And Vince Lombardi had a quote that I always use because it's very fitting for a lot of situations. He said that your individual commitment to a group effort, that's what makes a company grow, an organization win, a community win. Your individual commitment. And that means that it starts with you. We all have room to get better, whether it's being more informed, better communication skills, how we present ourselves, getting past the BS. Sometimes we allow our emotions to dictate how we feel, what we say, what we do to each other. We have to get better at that. So as a community, we may have to make an individual commitment to get better and be more involved. I've never seen a community that has more opportunities for the average citizen, the informed citizen, the person that wants to learn. There's so many boards. You could jump online and sign up for so many different committees and get out there, get involved, and meet your leaders. And let your voice be heard, your concerns, your desires. At the same time, our leaders, I've seen it in the short amount of time that I've been here too many times. Our leaders, we have to do better at being present in the moment. When that citizen and that person comes to you, that you're not pulling out your phone to look at your Facebook or your email. We have to be, as leaders, you have to be present in the moment and do better at respecting that person. We have to understand that for that citizen to come to you, it takes a lot of courage. For them to come to you and say something. And the best way to create distrust is by blowing it off. So I would challenge the community to look at ways to get better, and I would challenge the leaders to be more present in the moment and respect that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Equal opportunity.
Well, my suggestion is, get to know your police department. Take every opportunity to get to know your police department. We're a pretty large organization, but we're an organization made up of people. This is our community. We live here. I shop in the same stores. It's important to me that this is a safe community, and if it's important to you, you got to get involved. I know it's tough to flag us down in patrol cars and come up and talk to us because it's different when we're out working, but if you can invite us to your churches or you have some kind of meeting or something's going on that you can invite the police department, you should definitely do so. Give us an opportunity to get to know you and you get to know us. I think that's where we need to start. When we can start talking about like we're doing tonight, I think that's the best place to start. And again, thanks for coming. What's that?
Just 1 second, please, ma'am. We're going to allow the panel to finish. We're gonna allow the panel to finish. We're gonna be ma'am. We're gonna allow the panel to finish. We're gonna be respectful. Okay. So here's the initial conversation. We're gonna allow the panel to finish speaking at this particular time. Thank you so much. I appreciate your respect. Go ahead, please, Ms. Lee.
Thanks again for coming. I want to make a commitment myself to helping the community come together to have those difficult conversations around race. So I am going to set a sheet of paper up here, and if you would like to be involved in restorative justice and a restorative justice process around that, you could give me your name, an email address, a phone contact. If you don't want to wait, just write it on a scrap of paper and set it on the desk here.
Do you have information? Do you have an email that people can contact you at?
I do have an email address. It's Lynn, LYNNGLEE @AOL.com.
Thank you. Sure.
I want to, we went to that prayer vigil that Henry talked about earlier, and Todd was there, and Pete was there, and there was a young man that spoke, and he said something that really struck me as being really important, and that is to have constructive dialogue and not destructive dialogue. That was huge. But dialogue, we have to have constructive dialogue like this respectful back and forth. We're open to that. We're open to listening to what those issues are. That's the first thing I want to say. And the second thing is to understand that we in law enforcement are all individuals. I've said it a couple of times. Pete said it. Rob said it. We are individuals. How many of you feel like you have been stereotyped because of your color? Doesn't feel good, does it? Does it feel good? It doesn't. We don't like to be stereotyped because we're law enforcement either. And that is a stereotype. Because just because we put on a uniform each and every day, and our staffs each and every day go out to try and protect your families and my family and our community, we don't like being stereotyped either. And because of that, we have to engage in constructive dialogue. We can cure this as a community. We can trust one another. We can get to a point where JT doesn't feel uncomfortable by being contacted. It's important to us, too. Thank you.
Thank you. Pastor Cox.
One of the things I also, not only am I a pastor, but I'm also a school teacher. I teach JROTC in Pueblo, Colorado. And so I drive an hour to work and an hour back. It's predominantly 75% Hispanic. And I will tell you that there is a deep resentment and animosity towards some law enforcement. And a lot of the kids believe that all law enforcement they do is just show up in the middle of the night, kick the door down, drag mom and dad out of the house. And so we're breeding resentment. And I believe that the way forward is what you pointed out is community relations. And us seeing law enforcement out in the community as regular people and not just someone that is in the uniform. And I think that alone will help in some regards.
Thank you so much, Pastor Cox. Trevor.
A little bit out of my element here as the business guy, but
well, you're a community member. You're a citizen.
You know, it's been my observation that thugs and racists come in all colors, and that skin color needs to be as transparent as eye color when we're looking at our community, and so I think that I think we've made a lot of progress, and I think we've got a ways to go. And as far as how can we have stronger community and police relations, as a citizen, I'd like to feel like law enforcement takes property crime as seriously as traffic tickets. And I actually wish our DA was still here, because I'd talk to him about that a little bit. But and I think what Tico's doing here today, where you're getting to see the faces of our law enforcement, that these are people who genuinely care about you and our community, and having these conversations, I think that's absolutely a step in the right direction.
Thank you. JT.
I might not like this answer. But a lot of the answers were good answers, and I agree with them. And there's a lot of different ways that you can help improve relations and things like that. But one thing I want to speak on is is there a way that officers could, because I'm a man of faith, so is there a way that your officers could pray before they go on their shifts? Pray.
Amen.
Pray that you don't have to kill anyone. Pray that you don't have to racial profile anyone today. And because I go to a Christian school, Grand Canyon University is a Christian school, but not everyone there is a Christian. And even I run track, and our track team, we pray before every practice and every meet. And you'd be surprised at how that helps relations between the people, and just surprised at how practice goes or how the meets go. So I would just suggest pray. Just get in a circle and just pray and just yeah.
Who in here didn't like that answer? I thought it was awesome. Chief.
That was a good answer. I want to stand up now because I'm kind of thinking about running for mayor here in a couple months. I want to thank everybody for their precious time tonight. Every single person in this room is my boss, and you deserve a police department, a sheriff's office that's accountable, transparent, and reflective of your community. And that's our commitment. I can speak for Todd and Bill. That's our commitment to you. We got some work to do, but your voice is huge in giving us the right direction. Biggest mistake I can make as a police chief is to assume what this community needs. I need to hear your voice. I have community group meetings and some meetings out in the public, but nothing like this. I would suggest that we think about doing this on a periodic occasion. This is worth gold to me. Your time is precious, but I think it's worth doing this a couple times a year. And I will throw a counteroffer up to you also. The police department holds a Citizens Academy a couple times a year. The guy right there shaking his head, stand up for me, Officer Herrera.
Officer Herrera.
He's the guy to talk to, and he does an outstanding job on it. And it's getting to understand our community, what they need and expect out of the police department, and in turn teaching you a little bit about what our police department does. So, again, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. So let's give a quick round of applause to our panel, to our elected officials. We thank you all for coming. Thank you all so much. One thing I do want to make note of before you all leave, two things. Sherry's going to close us out. But one thing, Officer Wilson is soon to be promoted to Sergeant Wilson, and he is our community relations officer. And his replacement will be, tell us your name. So this is the new face you need to be looking for. So we just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. We're going to let Sherry have the last words and Peggy close us out. But we want you to know, by no means do we think that this is the answer to all of our problems. But if we didn't, Sherry and I are mothers, we're women of faith, and we wanted to say, if we wanted to have the dialogue just between her and I, and we tried to figure out a way we could invite you all into that dialogue as well. And so by no means are we figuring we're going to answer everybody's question. And we're not trying to be dismissive of that. But we want you all to know, if we continue to wait for everything to be okay to have the conversation, we will never have it. So tonight was just an initial start. Where do we start it, and how do we have mutual respect? How do we have it for one another? And I think we did a wonderful job of that tonight. I want to thank you all for your support. I want to thank you all for your cooperation. And we hope that this is just the beginning for our community. We get to decide. I will tell you what, my daughter sent me a quote. I tell you, you know, disparities are inevitable, but division is a choice. Division is a choice. We can't solve all of this economic disparities and the racial disparities and the educational disparities, but with the help of God, we can choose to stand united in El Paso County. And so that's what we want to do here tonight. And to my counterpart, my buddy in crime, Sherry Gibson, I couldn't have did this. We did this together. We lost many nights of sleep in prayer. Just want you guys to know that. Thank you for your time.
So just real quick, I do want to send a special shout out to our District Attorney, Dan May. I see that he's left, but he was not expecting to come in the front and answer questions, so he did a good job at doing that. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you all so much. I consider you all personal friends to this community and friends of mine as well, excuse me. So there are light refreshments upstairs. Help yourselves. These folks are sticking around if you have questions that you want to ask. I know, like Tico said, we didn't get to everyone's question, but please, please use them as a resource, reach out to them, and then just have that dialogue.
Well, again, we just want to make sure that you guys thank Dr. Hardy and Sherry Gibson for putting this panel together and for hosting this evening. Come on down. If you have questions, these guys are going to stick around. They want to hear your specific individual questions if we did not get to them tonight.